She wasn't destined to be queen. She fought for the crown. But in the court of King Henry VIII, love is deadly, and one whisper could send you to the executioner's blade. This is the rise and fall of Anne Boleyn, the woman a king adored, and then destroyed. Like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the secrets they tried to erase from history. She wasn't born with a crown. Anne Boleyn came into this world in 1501, not as royalty, but as a girl with dangerous ambition. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, served the royal court, a place where one wrong look could destroy you, and one right smile could change a kingdom. Anne learned fast. She wasn't the most beautiful in England, but she had something far more powerful: intelligence, mystery, and a fire in her words that even the richest ladies couldn't match. When she returned from the French court, elegant, confident, speaking like a queen, as everyone noticed, especially the king. Henry VIII had already taken her sister Mary Boleyn as his mistress, but when he saw Anne, something inside him shifted. She refused his gifts, rejected his advances, and told him no. No one told a king no, but Anne did, and that's what made him obsessed. Henry wanted more than her body. He wanted her completely, a woman who could challenge a throne, and challenge him. But love in Tudor England was a loaded gun. For Anne to rise, another woman had to fall: Queen Catherine of Aragon, the wife Henry once claimed God himself had chosen for him. Anne whispered in the king's ear, "Your marriage is cursed. Your queen can't give you a son. I can." Those words were the spark that would burn the entire kingdom. Churches would divide. Families would turn against each other. Blood would spill in the name of love, and Anne? She believed a crown would protect her. But soon she would learn. In Henry's court, the closer you are to the throne, the closer you are to the blade. Henry VIII was a king who always got what he wanted. And now he wanted Anne Boleyn, not as a secret mistress, but as Queen of England. But one problem stood in the way. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, loved by the people, respected by Europe, and fiercely loyal. Henry begged the Pope to annul the marriage. The Pope refused, so Henry did the unthinkable. He turned against the church. He declared himself the supreme head of a new Church of England. Priests who disagreed were silenced. Nobles who opposed disappeared. Monasteries robbed, burned, destroyed, all for one woman. Anne watched the kingdom fracture because of her, and she believed it was proof of destiny. The court split in two: those who worshipped Anne as the future mother of England, and those who whispered she was a sorceress, a woman who had bewitched the king. The streets filled with venomous gossip. She has 6 fingers on her hand. She carries the devil's mark. Henry is blind, cursed by lust. But Henry didn't listen. He placed a ring on her finger and a target on her back. On a winter night in January 1533, under candlelight and secrecy, Anne and Henry were married. A forbidden union, a union that broke their kingdom. Anne was now Queen of England, but she felt no triumph. Not yet. Not until she did what Catherine never could: give Henry a son. Months passed. The fate of England formed inside her womb, the entire nation holding its breath. When the day finally arrived, the cries of a newborn echoed through the palace. A girl. Princess Elizabeth. Silence, a cruel silence. Henry forced a smile. He told the court it was God's will. Next time would be a son. But Anne saw it in his eyes. The first crack in his devotion. The same obsession that lifted her to the throne, was ready to crush her if she failed again. She had won the crown, but her real battle had just begun. The crown on Anne Boleyn's head glittered like victory, but beneath it, her skull throbbed with fear. Every day without a son was a day closer to death. Anne walked the cold halls of the palace with walls that whispered. Ladies-in-waiting who once bowed to her now looked away. Laughs stopped when she entered the room. Smiles hid poison, because while the world saw a queen, the court saw a usurper. And then came Jane Seymour's, quiet, soft-eyed, and everything Anne wasn't. She stood just close enough to Henry to be noticed, and innocent enough to be trusted. Henry's gaze lingered on Jane longer than a king should. Anne saw it. The fear she swallowed every night now began to choke her every morning. She tried again. A second pregnancy, a chance to silence every enemy with a single heartbeat. But fate was cruel. One cold January day, Anne received news that shattered her spirit. Henry had been gravely injured in a jousting accident. They thought he was dead, Anne collapsed in terror. She screamed. She cried. And in those moments of madness and despair, she lost the child inside her, another son, gone before he ever saw the world. Henry survived, but something inside him died that day. He blamed Anne. He blamed the woman he once swore he'd destroy kingdoms for. Anne's enemies sharpened their daggers. They whispered, "She killed the prince through witchcraft. She is a serpent wearing a crown. England is cursed by her presence." And Henry listened, the king who once wrote love letters begging for her kiss, now avoided even her shadow. Anne looked at the same crown she fought the world to wear, and realized it wasn't made of gold, it was made of thorns. The court wanted her gone. The king wanted a son, and the executioner was already polishing his blade. The dinners were elegant. The halls were jeweled. The music played softly. Yet in the heart of the palace, terror walked on silent feet. For Anne Boleyn, the world changed overnight from Queen of England to queen surrounded by traitors. Her greatest enemy, the throne itself. She no longer heard cheers. She heard whispers behind tapestries. She no longer felt security in her gilded chamber. She sensed eyes in the darkness. Thomas Cromwell appeared more loyal than a dog, but his loyalty was to the king. He shuffled documents, collected allegations, nurtured charges, sharpened axes. In his ledger were names of those who supported Anne. One day they vanished. The small circle Anne had once trusted, ladies, friends from the French court, courtiers who carried her hopes, shrank. They were accused of treason, adultery, even witchcraft, and suddenly their whispers reached Anne's ears. She dances at midnight. The child she bore is not the king's, but the true enemy wore Henry's face. The king who kissed her hand and vowed to destroy his enemies for her looked away when she walked in the room. He sat with Jane Seymour by his side. He gave Jane his laughter, his confidences, his glance. Anne could feel the blade hovering. Every time Henry stepped away from her, the room grew colder. Even the crown she wore felt icy. Then the trap closed. In the spring of 1536, Thomas Cromwell presented a list of charges. Adultery, incest, conspiracy to kill the king. They were lies woven from fear. But power is ruthless. Anne was arrested at dawn. There were no trumpets, no announcement. Just guards, steel, and silence. She was dragged away from the palace that had raised her, from the throne she had claimed. And as the gates of the great tower slammed behind her, she realized she had forgotten how to fear. Until now. The stone walls of the Tower of London echoed with footsteps, cold, hard, final. Anne Boleyn had been stripped of her power, her friends, her freedom. Now she walked the path of the accused. In the small, bitter chamber she was held, she faced not one judge but the full might of a king's vengeance. The charges were monstrous. Adultery with her brother, George Boleyn, incest, plotting to murder the king, witchcraft. Each one more hideous than the last. The evidence was thin, constructed by fear and ambition rather than truth. But that did not matter. In Henry's England, the king's will was law. The trial lasted only a few days. Those who spoke for her found themselves silenced. Those who believed her were threatened. Anne maintained her composure. She refused to beg, refused to weep publicly. She spoke of her innocence. She praised the king, but carefully, because even in her speech she had to navigate the blade hanging above her. Her daughter, Elizabeth, watched from the shadows, barely 3 years old, unaware of the world shifting beneath her. The crown that once felt like triumph now weighed like lead. As verdict was read, Anne's fate was sealed. Guilty, but the most cruel lie was yet to come. The sentence would stop at her body. Her name, her very memory, was targeted next. In the days before the execution, they prepared the scaffold, but not for dignity. The king wanted spectacle. A French swordsman brought in at great expense to deliver the merciful blow while the crowd watched. This detail, meant to soften the death, only deepened the horror. Rumors swirled in the courtyard. She confessed. She begged for mercy. The truth, she had done neither. She entered the chapel, prayed quietly, stood calm. On the morning of May 19, 1536, she walked to the low scaffold on Tower Green. She turned to the crowd and spoke. "Good people, I am come hither to die." According to the law, her voice steady, her gaze strong, the sword fell. In that moment the queen became a warning. But the true weight of her death would be felt long after the blood dried. long after the crown lay in the dust, because her memory would become the battlefield. The sword struck swiftly. Anne's head fell, and a silence heavier than death settled over the crowd. Just like that, her enemies believed they had erased her. A king remade his honor, a court washed its hands in royal blood. The world moved on, but Anne Boleyn was not done. Her body was placed in an unpadded arrow chest. Too small for a queen, too brutal for a woman who once ruled England. No grand funeral, no procession, no tomb carved in marble. She was buried without a single prayer from the church she helped create. Henry VIII remarried only 11 days later, wedding Jane Seymour, the queen he wanted all along. The court smiled again, music returned to the halls, but something else returned too. A fear, because although Anne was dead, her daughter still lived, Princess Elizabeth. The child they all dismissed as a disappointment, for she was not the prince Henry demanded. Yet she carried her mother's fire, her mind, her fascination with power. The years passed. Kings died, queens burned, wars raged, and then England crowned the very girl born into disappointment, Queen Elizabeth III. Under her rule, England entered its greatest era, a time of strength, culture, and knowledge. A time the world would call the Elizabethan Age. Anne's bloodline, the blood they tried to bury, shaped a nation for centuries. The woman they accused of witchcraft gave England its most legendary queen. The woman they executed without mercy is now remembered as one of history's most iconic figures. No marble tomb was built for Anne Boleyn, but she doesn't need one. Her legacy is carved in something far stronger than stone, a daughter who changed the world. So when you hear her story, remember this: a king killed Anne Boleyn to erase her, yet everything he feared, everything he tried to destroy, survived, and now it is the king who is forgotten, while Anne Boleyn lives forever.